Before we get into the podcast, be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at This Strange World Podcast and on Twitter at This Strange Pod.
Welcome back to This Strange World. I'm Gavin.
I'm Leah.
And I'm Chris.
And we're back. Third episode of the season. I'm so sorry to cut you off, Leah. How's
You're
everybody
doing? We're good. How are you?
Good. Living it up. It's, I don't know, when is this? It's February, maybe, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. How crazy time flies. Tis but an illusion, as I'm trying to, or is it March? No, it's March. Now I think it's March. Wow. Crazy. It's not March for us. Leah, you've got a very fun episode today. I won't even waste any time. And you brought a guest. So what are we talking about today? And who is this stranger in our call?
Okay. Well, would the stranger like to introduce himself?
Yeah, hi. My name's Nathan Klambara, and I'm an archaeologist outside of Binghamton University.
Cool. Nice to have you on.
Thank you.
So we have a really fun topic, probably one of the hardest topics that I've had to research. But basically, my fall semester of senior year, I had taken an archaeology class, and Nathan was my professor, and he actually introduced me and Chris, who was also in the class, to pseudoarchaeology a little bit. That was the topic for one of the days. So we're just kind of gonna jump right into it. So I feel like a lot of my recent podcasts have had very hard words and names to pronounce. So I'm gonna definitely try my hardest to pronounce these words and names correctly, but I'm really sorry. I don't mean to offend anyone. And like I said earlier, this podcast was one of the harder ones for me to find information because unlike others, this wasn't necessarily a search and find the direct answer. There's answers that were kind of made up, because that's what pseudoarchaeology is, and I'll get into that in a second. And then there are the real answers. Starting off, we have the definition of pseudoarchaeology. So to simply put it, pseudoarchaeology is fake archaeology. The suffix pseudo, which comes from the Greek word pseudon, it means to cheat or to lie, but in a much broader sense, it is an archaeological claims, conclusions, ideas, or notions which have fake, fraudulent, or overly fantastic bases in reality rather than being solidly grounded in scientific method.
I would think that all, just with archaeology being archaeology, that it's that archaeology is very much, that's what it is, and very scientific. It seems very weird that they would have to have a specific section of archaeology that's this is archaeology, but it's not real archaeology. It's kind of like it, but different.
Well, the thing is, pseudoarchaeology isn't real archaeology. So it's being used to kind of describe all of the fake archaeology, the quacks out there who are pretending to be archaeologists, but they're not real archaeologists. So pseudoarchaeology is really a derisive phrase that we use. It's not like you train to be an archaeologist and you're like, I'm going to specialize in pseudoarchaeology.
So it can be anyone, in their basement, they can be a pseudoarchaeologist. They can, try to draw conclusions.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So pseudoarchaeology actually can be harmful when it comes to trying to get the real information about history out there. And a lot of pseudoarchaeology falls under kind of three categories. Of course, there are more, but the main three are religious and biblical, aliens that visited the past, and the humans that have superpowered brains. And I have examples for most of these, but those are kind of where the top three fall under.
Yeah, when you say pseudoarchaeology or fake archaeology, I the first thing I think of is aliens built the pyramids, and where it's I don't know if that's necessarily true, but is that kind of pseudoarchaeology?
That's definitely it. Anything you see on ancient aliens on the History Channel, that's all pseudoarchaeology. Whenever you're it doesn't sound right, it's probably pseudo.
Yeah. So to go right into this, we're going to talk about the Kensington Runestone. Now, discovered in central Minnesota in 1898, the Kensington Runestone is a 202-pound slab of Greywick stone covered in runes. Olaf Uman, I'm so sorry, a Swedish immigrant, reported that he unearthed it from a field in a largely rural township of Solum in Douglas County. The inscription purports to be a record left behind by Scandinavian explorers in the 14th century. There has been a drawn-out debate on the stone's authenticity, but the scholarly census has classified it as a 19th century hoax since the time it was first examined in 1910, with some critics directly charging the purport's discoverer Oman with fabricating the inscription. Nevertheless, there remains a community convinced of the stone's authenticity.
So basically, it's a fake. It's a stone that this guy's like, oh, I found inscriptions of something written on it, and that was a lie.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. That's what it is. I'm actually not as familiar with this one as some of the other ones on the list, but it's common where people will call you up out of the blue. As archaeologists, we get emails all of the time to our like university emails, and people will be like, "Hey, I found this really cool item," and most of the time it's just a rock. It's just a thing. It's just a thing that you get all the time, and you'll tell people it's just a rock, and they will fight you every step of the way. Where they'll be like, "No, I found the oldest thing in, New York State," or I'm originally from Ohio, so I dealt with a lot of people from Ohio and Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, you just have to be like, it's just a rock most of the time.
Sorry to
funny.
break your bubble, burst your bubble, but
Yeah.
It's funny that they call you the professional, and then you go and you're like, no, it's just a rock, and they're like, no, it's real. I know it. I know more than you.
you're tripping.
Yeah, but people, and it's great that people are really excited and people want to know more about the past and they want to find things, and that's really cool. But most of the time, yeah, it's just rocks. I used to work in a stone tool lab when I was an undergraduate, and I would be in charge of like receiving the mail every day, and people would just mail me boxes of rocks, and it was just the rocks that you would find in your backyard. And yeah, so these things are really common. Hoaxes are really common in archaeology. I don't think it's on your list, but probably the most famous one from the United States is the Piltdown hoax. I don't know if you're familiar with that one at
Never heard
all.
of it.
But essentially, there was this dude who was an American, and he wanted to prove that humans evolved in the Americas and not Africa. And so he literally took a human skull and an orangutan jaw, dyed them so they looked really, really old, smashed them together, and said, "Oh, I found the oldest human ancestor." And it came from right here in the United States.
I think I saw something on that online.
Yeah,
think,
and so it was big
yeah.
in the United States. It was really big in Britain, and it lasted a really long time where people were like, "Oh, people didn't evolve in Africa. They evolved, either in the United States or they evolved in, the United Kingdom, Great Britain." But it was all a hoax the whole time. These are really common.
But it's weird that someone would try to do something like that, because there's all this evidence of humans coming from Africa and how they moved to, the Europe and the Asia areas. Not, you didn't get it until much later that they were in the Americas, and now this guy comes forward with one skull instead of like tribes and tribes of people. Like it's weird that, I don't know how archaeology goes, but it's weird that it lasted so long as it did when it was just one skull instead of like more skulls that people found together.
Yeah, one of the reasons that it lasted so long was when I don't remember the exact year of the Piltdown hoax, but I believe it was in the 19th century. So it was before we really had a lot of these fossils that were found in the 20th century. But the other reason is that particularly people in the United States and Great Britain, they didn't like the fact that Africa was kind of the cradle of humanity. And if you could make the original place of human evolution, the place where white people are from, that's what they really wanted. So it's like they
Okay.
wanted to believe it. And a lot of pseudoarchaeology is people finding things that they want to believe rather than actually getting it.
Interesting. Very interesting. So the next one on this list is more of a phenomenon, but we were all alive when it happened. Chris, Gavin, and I, we were in 7th grade. Nathan, I don't know about you, but I was 13, and I remember when this happened in school, everyone freaked out. Like, I think it was transitioning between classes, and everyone just like threw their books in the air and threw papers in the air. We're running through the hallways screaming. It was fun. We were in middle school.
I think you should really lead with what the event is, because if I didn't know what you were talking about, I would think you were talking about like 9/11 or something. So I think you should really lead with what the event is.
Wow. Wow. I didn't go that far,
I was
Gavin.
gonna get into
You're
it.
just
but
talking
okay.
about like being young and in school and like freaking out. I just want
Okay.
the listeners to know this is talking about like a decade later.
Okay, so this was actually the 2012 phenomenon, and this was a range of beliefs that the world would end around the 21st of December in 2012. This date was regarded as the end date of a 5,126-year long cycle in Mesoamerican long count calendar. Others suggested that the date marked the end of the world or a similar catastrophe. Scenarios suggested for the end of the world, including the arrival of the next solar maximum, which is just basically really large sunspots appearing, which isn't the best thing, or an interaction between Earth and the supermassive black hole in the center of our galaxy, or the Earth's collision with a mythical planet called Nibiru, I think is how you pronounce it. Scholars from various disciplines quickly dismissed predictions of cataclysmic events as they arose. Mayan scholars stated that no classic Mayan account forecast impending doom, and the idea that the long count calendar ends in 2012 misinterpreted Mayan history and culture. Astronomers rejected the various proposed doomsday scenarios as pseudoscience, which is refuted by elementary astronomical observations.
I remember this. I remember how everyone thought that the world was going to end, and all of our teachers were like, "No, you're fine." Like one of my teachers put together this entire slideshow, basically telling us that we're fine. And then after we got out of class, everyone still went back to like, "I can't believe the world is going to end."
Mm-hmm.
Everyone
Yeah.
was freaking out about this.
I honestly don't even remember freaking out a huge amount about like I don't remember this being such a big. I mean, I remember when it was like, oh, the world was supposed to end, and like there was like a movie that came out about the world's ending, but like I don't remember it being like maybe it was. I mean, that was also years ago. I don't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, so maybe I'm not the person to ask about what happened in 2012.
Yeah, I remember it being a pretty big deal. I was a sophomore in college in 2012, sophomore or junior. And I remember it being a big deal. I remember everybody wanted the end of the world to happen because then we wouldn't have to take finals at the end of this fall semester. Yeah, so
Yeah. I think I had a test coming up, and I was like, oh, is this going to happen? Now that yeah. Again, a while ago. I don't remember what I had yesterday to eat either. The next one is the Bosnian Pyramid Complex. This is a pseudo-archaeological notion to explain the formation of a cluster of natural hills in the area of Visoko in central Bosnia and Herzegovina. Something like
Close
that.
enough. Yeah.
Close enough.
Herzegovina.
Yes. Since 2005, Simir Osmanagic, a Bosnian American businessman, has claimed that these hills are the largest human-made ancient pyramids on Earth. However, his claims have been overwhelmingly refuted by scientists, but he has proceeded to promote the area as a tourist attraction. A direct study of the site by geologists, archaeologists, and other scientists have demonstrated that the hills are natural formations known as flatirons and that there is no evidence that they were shaped by human construction, making the European Association of Archaeologists labeling his theory as a cruel hoax, along with various other scholars that are also concerned about the damage being done to genuine archaeological and paleontological sites. Osmanagic initiated excavations in 2006 and has since reshaped one of the hills, making it look like a step pyramid. The academic community has called for the government to end funding of excavations and disruption of the site because of the damage to true archaeological resources. So therefore, this guy was like, oh yeah, this is a big pyramid, but, it's not, and they kind of cut his funding.
It sounds like to me that he saw an opportunity where he saw a bunch of hills that kind of looked like humans made them, and he's like, well, I can get some tourism here. It sounds like he was doing it sort of more like a money grab, where he could get a lot of people to come in and sell this as a new archaeological site. And then that seems why he sort of got a little upset when they told him that it wasn't, and so he kept trying to push it, and then he reshaped it to make it look more like it so people would come in and fall for the trap. That's just my interpretation. I don't know if that's his motives, but
I would probably say that's probably fair.
Yeah.
Anytime anybody says they found the oldest of anything, I'm always suspicious because usually if you say you found the oldest of something, you're doing it for the fame and fortune, and it's probably a lie.
Mhm.
Right now, the countries of France and Australia are actually in a war about who has the oldest cave art back from like the Ice Age. And you'll get
Oh, wow.
France, and they'll be like, France will be like, we have cave art that's 45,000 years old. And Australia will be like, well, we just redated our sites and it's 45,000 years old and one. And then they'll literally go back and forth. And like, it's
And
like,
the
we're
one.
like, yeah, we're like pushing it back months and months. So, and that's even regular archaeology. But when you see anything that says it's the oldest of something, it's probably not.
Yeah, and I mean this was also like 2005, 2006. So like the other interesting thing about this is that it's like the internet's here. I feel like a lot of this was probably easier to get away with pre-internet because then people can't just like look this up and immediately be like, there's something off about it. But I wonder if the internet helped or hurt him, as in if like it was able to spread through the internet of people being like, oh, there's this thing and like, whoa, or like whether people it was like more quickly refuted.
It sounds like it helped, particularly since based off of Leah, what you were reading, it seems like the Bosnian government for a while was on board and he was actually getting government funding for this. So the internet probably helped advertise it a bit, got the government involved. The government probably wanted it to be the oldest. You know, this idea of nationalism where you can say that the oldest of anything is in Bosnia Herzegovina, you know, they're going to be all about it. So it probably helped him get the funding that he needed.
The next one a lot of people have probably heard of, and this is the searches for Noah's Ark. There have been many searches for this ark made from basically UBS Serta 275 to 339 to the present day. Despite many expeditions, no physical proof of the ark has been found. Many of the supposed findings and methods are regarded as pseudoscience and pseudoarchaeology by geologists and archaeologists. There has been some unsubstantiated claims circulating the whereabouts of the Ark. However, Ark seeker Richard Carl Bright firmly believes that the government of Turkey, Russia, and the US know exactly where the Ark sits.
I have a hard time believing that the wood. Wait, we're talking about Noah's Ark, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a hard time believing that the wood would last this long. I mean, I don't know how long wooden artifacts last, how long they, because they rot away and everything. And, if in the story it landed on top of a mountain, I have a hard time, especially on top of a mountain with all the wind and everything, that this wood would last as long as it did, especially now. And so I feel like whenever someone says, I found Noah's Ark, it's like, well, I mean, the wood doesn't last that long.
That's the thing you find hard to believe about this is the fact that you think that the wood didn't last like
it
15,000 years.
I mean, it disproves really the theories of when people come out and they say, I know where the Ark is. It's like people are expecting this big ship,
you're
or at
totally
least like
right.
the remnants of it.
No, yes. I'm just saying that I don't know if the wood is the first thing that made me go, maybe it's a newer Ark.
Right, since religion is such a big area for pseudoarchaeology to come in. Not only Noah's Ark, but the Shroud of Turin gets brought up every few years. That's the burial shroud that Jesus was allegedly buried in.
Yeah.
But if you actually, so people will actually say like you can see Jesus's like blood stains on it from his body. But if you do the mathematical calculations, Jesus would have had to been like 8 feet tall for that to have happened for this shroud to make sense. It's everywhere. If you took every piece of like the cross that Jesus was crucified, that every church around the world claims was actually from the real cross, I think you'd get like 6 full crosses. Like religion is just such a big place for this.
I think a lot of it too is like because religion is such a big part about people's lives, they want to have some object that they can hold that proves that what they believe is real. It just seems like there's a lot of people that are looking for that tangible object.
Yeah. Especially then if there is this pseudoscience that can prove that their religion is real and like all these things are that there was Noah's Ark and that there is the cross and all these things, even if it's then like you're saying, it's like in New York, every coffee shop claims they're the best coffee shop, but like you're not all the best coffee shop. There's a lot of coffee shops.
Right.
Exactly.
So everyone claiming to have this piece of quote a pseudoarchaeology that there's some reason for suspicion, I would say.
Don't be suspicious.
Definitely.
Okay. The next one is just thinking of that. Okay. The next one is Atlantis. Atlantis is a fictional island mentioned in an allegory on the hubris of nations in Plato's works Timaeus and Critias. Plato gave only one clue to the city's location. He wrote that it sat in front of the Pillars of Hercules. This places the city near the Strait of Gibraltar at the western edge of the Mediterranean Sea. Plato wrote Atlantis tried and failed to invade Athens and Greece. Afterwards, it sank into the ocean in a single day and night of misfortune. Aside from Plato's original account, modern interpretations regarding Atlantis are an amalgamation of diverse speculative movements that began in the 16th century when scholars began to identify Atlantis with the New World. Contemporary perceptions of Atlantis share roots with Mayanism, which can be traced to the beginning of the modern age, when European imaginations were fueled by their initial encounters with the indigenous peoples of the Americas. From this era sprang apocalyptic and utopian visions that would inspire many subsequent generations of theorists. Most of these interpretations are considered pseudo-history, pseudoscience, or pseudoarchaeology, as they have presented their work as academic or scientific, but lack the stance of criteria.
All I'll say is that I would not want Plato to be the guy giving me directions, because the only thing he wrote to get to this big city is in front of the Pillars of Hercules. That's not very specific.
Yeah.
And I don't have a good sense of direction. So that really would not be helpful to me.
But at the other end, the reason we found the city of Troy is because of people reading the Iliad and the Odyssey. So that's how originally Howard Schliemann found the city of Troy. So sometimes it does work. This is a little vague. I wouldn't necessarily follow it. But there is a lot of precedent for people finding weird archaeological sites in these strange historical texts.
Before you brought it up, I was gonna say that didn't they find like the city of Troy based off the text from the Iliad and stuff, which kind of goes in favor of the people that believe that Atlantis might be a real thing, is because they might be like, well, if you follow the text, you could find the city of Troy that way, and then there's other cities that they have and other places that they found because of text and everything. So why wouldn't Atlantis be one of those things? It's just the vagueness of it is very hard for a lot of people to find.
Yeah. I think Atlantis could be a real place. It's just that I feel like a lot of modern contemporary depictions of Atlantis are like this working underwater city with like fish people or like people
Right.
in a bubble like underwater. But like there very well could be a sunken city that got flooded or something happened that it is now sunk and that. But I think people have stretched it a little bit nowadays. I don't think that there's a fully working underwater city where everyone wears scuba gear or something.
I'd like to imagine that, though.
No, that would be so fun. I like to swim.
Yeah.
That would be hype. But again, reason for suspicion.
The crazy thing, though, people will say about Atlantis, though, there is a lot of pseudoarchaeology that says that Atlantis, like the people of Atlantis, actually built the pyramids. That they literally came out of the city, built the pyramids, went back to their city, and that the city is supposed to, as Leah read, it's supposed to still be off the coast of Europe somewhere. That they just believe that most of Europe is underwater right now, and Atlantis is part of that. But there's so many crazy things, like that Atlantis originated the Native Americans, that Atlantis originated the pyramids. Everything comes from Atlantis because it doesn't exist right now. So because of that, you can just ascribe it to anything.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Moving on to another ark, this is the Ark of the Covenant, also known as the Ark of Testimony, and in a few verses across various translations of the Bible as the Ark of God, is a gold-covered wooden chest with lid cover described in the book of Exodus as containing 2 stone tablets of the 10 Commandments. According to the New Testament book of Hebrews, it also contained Aaron's rod in a pot of manna, which is also a type of food that doesn't look super fun to eat. But pseudo-archaeologist Cook Ron Wyatt's alleged discovery of the Ark of the Covenant is very light of evidence. He took photos of the excavation that he was on to find it, but they came out very blurred, and the original records have been removed from circulation. It is also alleged that he saw a giant sword possibly formerly belonging to Goliath, and certainly not broken off from a huge statue somewhere. Wyatt is claimed to have found a strange black substance later tested and found to be human blood. It claims to be the blood of Jesus because it contains half the number of chromosomes that would normally be present in the human male. However, Wyatt and his supporters have not explained how the tests on the blood were performed, nor have they released the data necessary to confirm their claims.
This is like quintessential pseudoarchaeology, is like saying like, well, we have these scientific tests, and they're like, well, how'd you do them? And they're like, well, take our word for it. We did them.
Believe us. Just
Yeah,
trust
basically
me.
like trust us. Yeah.
Yeah.
With all the secrecy,
Yeah.
whenever it's like just show us where it's at. It's like when they found when they allegedly found an alien mummy in an Egyptian pyramid, and they were like, yeah, but no one can see it. Like, but you can't have it. And it's like, well, that's the only proof that you've got. You have to show us something. But they're always like,
Right.
yeah, you can have a little bit, but not too much. It's kind of that idea.
To make you think, well, it could be something, but we're not going to tell you what it is. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm not well versed in biblical stuff, but I didn't realize the Ark of the Covenant was a real thing. I thought that was just from Indiana Jones. Was that like a real religious thing? Also, is that the thing in Indiana Jones, or am I crazy?
No, it is the thing in
It's the
Indiana
same
Jones.
thing. Yeah. It's
Okay.
it was a lot in the. I went to Catholic high school, so we had to talk about this a lot. It was like they had it. It was a real. I'm going off what I learned, but it was a real thing that they had that carried like tablets, and they brought it to different cities, and they lost it, and then they found it, and then they lost it again, and now like they lost it for good, and now it's like, now it's really lost, and now all these people are like, well, I found it, and so that's where all this pseudoarchaeology comes from. But it was a thing like a long time ago.
Yeah, I think that all of these different religious examples of pseudoarchaeology, I mean, I assume that they're basically their own category of pseudoarchaeology, because I assume every single little thing from all the different religions, that there's probably been people being like, oh, I found the original Bible or the original whatever, and I found, and like everyone's trying to make these claims or twist it for their beliefs, or that they found it or whatever.
Well, this is going off script.
Off script.
People think that like different things were in the box, and a lot, like what Chris said, the box or the covenant was kind of put into different hands. Different people, quote unquote, found it and then hid it, and then found it and hid it and then lost it, like Chris said. So yeah, we don't really know where it is, but I did want to mention that.
And also, not to get back to like Chris's thing about the wood, but I'm fixating on the chromosome thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That there's only half the number of chromosomes. Like,
so I could go more into that if you'd like to hear it.
Yeah, I would love that.
Half the number of chromosomes. It must be Jesus's blood. It's
like, I like that they made Jesus human enough to have chromosomes, but not human enough that he needs the full set.
Yeah.
He was built different. He only needs a little bit.
Okay, so it says that the human males normally have 46 chromosomes. So with 23 coming from the mother and 23 coming from the father, Jesus, having the product of virginal contraception, would have only obtained 23 chromosomes from his mother, Mary. Of course, this ignores the fact that a person missing half their chromosomes would be unlikely to develop in any normal sense as a human being. So that kind of clarifies the chromosome question.
But you get your sex chromosome, like your male or female chromosome, from your father. So then Jesus would just be like Mary 2.0.
Like a clone. Like a clone.
Yeah, like you would essentially be half of your mom, but that's it, half.
Yeah. It just seems like that's a lot of what like pseudoarchaeology is like, it's just enough of like, just enough, I'm forgetting the word, it's just enough compelling where there's a lot of people that would be like, yep, that's it. There's your proof right there. And then like they don't want to look any further, but it's like just enough proof where people could be swayed if they wanted to believe that sort of thing.
Yeah, it includes just enough of the science to make you think that it could be legitimate. So the fact that they brought up chromosomes at all here, I think is a really important thing about they're trying to give it scientific legitimacy. without even recognizing that you could not survive as a human being with 23 chromosomes.
That's just not human.
But they're still not going to release the data necessary to confirm the claims. So
Yeah.
No, it's
We'll
locked
stay
away
in
in the
that
vault.
Okay, so this one is kind of the longer one on the list. And Gavin, Chris, Nathan, when you talk about Egypt and you hear Egypt, what are the top 3 things that come into your head?
Hieroglyphics.
Okay.
Mummies.
Okay.
Like sandy buildings, like
Sarcophaguses.
sphinxes and
Sphinxes. I'm trying to say everything else except for what you want.
Yeah.
Oh,
what-
okay.
Headpieces, like
Tombs.
robes, but like white cloth, linens.
There.
I don't know what you're trying. I don't know what you're trying to get at, Leah. Yes.
Okay. Well, I was hoping one of you would say pyramids. And that is what I'm actually
Oh,
gonna be.
That was definitely gonna be like, maybe like the 10th thing I was gonna say. That was like maybe like 11.
Well, this is what we're going to talk about in this section. In Egypt lies one of the great pyramids named the Pyramid of Giza. Although there are 3 pyramids, the one that I'm talking about is the oldest one, as well as the largest of the 3. And surrounding that particular pyramid are mysteries and so many questions that are just still unexplained. People wonder how this massive pyramid was built and what was its purpose. So there are 5 things that are surprisingly accurate and just mind-blowing. And the first one on the list is that the pyramid lines up very, very close to true north. But the thing is that the Earth's magnetic forces have actually changed slightly over time. So with that change in mind, back when the pyramid was first made, it was most likely true north.
If that's true, I'm getting a little ahead of myself just because I know that I might know where this is going, just because people are going to be like, well, that means that the pyramids are built by whatever. The thing that bothers me about when people say like, oh, it must be aliens or it must be like, why can't they just be really smart? Like, if it was true that the pyramids lined up with true north, like, why couldn't it be just like the pyramid that the Egyptians like would look up at the sky and know like, oh, this is where this must be, this is where this is. So they arranged their tombs to be that way. Like they're not savages. Like they were smart enough to build the pyramids. I'm sure they can figure out what north is.
That's
Yeah.
exactly it. We often think of the prehistoric peoples as not being smart enough to do things, but they were. There were people's full-time jobs were to design and build these pyramids. They would have done it well, and they would have known things like about where stars were. They didn't have light pollution, so they would have had a better idea of like astronomy than we do.
Oh, that's true.
I never know.
That's
Yeah, I
actually a
didn't
very
realize
good
that.
case about light
Yeah.
pollution. The other thing is that the blocks that they used was measured as a cubit, which is 1.86 feet. So if you took the distance between the North and South Pole, it would measure 25 million cubits, which is very precise in the fact that it's pretty accurate between the North and South Pole. Yeah.
But isn't that also
Okay.
just kind of arbitrary? Like we decided that 25 million is impressive. Like if it was 27 million cubits, would it be less than, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Where like it just seems like it's an arbitrary distance, but we're like, oh yeah, a cubit. Like what the hell's a cubit? You know what I mean? Like
why is that impressive to begin with? You could like, what if instead the blocks were measured by like they were each half of a cubit or a gibbet, and then it's like the
A
Earth is
gibbon.
50
I give it.
gibbets. Like what? Like so what? They can like you can make any measuring. Was it halfway in between the North and South Pole? Is that what it was?
Yeah, so if you took the distance between the North and South Pole, it would measure to the 25 million cubits.
I feel like
which
you
one
could do that
thing
with
that's
anything.
it's stupid art. It's like arbitrary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so the next thing is that if you take the cardinal directions of the pyramid and extended their directions outwards like a line, the lines will cross through the most landmass of any place on Earth. This means that the pyramid is at the center of the total landmass of Earth.
I feel like they're really just like they had a big list of different accomplishments that the pyramids could accomplish, and they were like, let's see which ones check off, and we'll show off those. And if they don't, then let's not talk about that.
Just think very extraordinary, very like, wow, we're gonna blow people's mind a few hundred years later.
Yeah, they're like people in the future are gonna love this. They're gonna eat this up.
I feel like it's like a lot of these people that come up with these theories and these these scientific proofs or whatever, they just say it like they just like, oh yeah, and this is what the pyramid is, and they don't say like, and this is how we figured out that this was the only spot on Earth that this could happen, and like they don't like go into like this is how we figured this out. We traced the lines, we looked at globes, we looked at maps, like we did the tracing of the. It's just they're saying it, and then they're like, yep, that's it. That's that's it. They just say it. They don't have any proof to back it up with anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
as humans, we just really love patterns. And when
Yeah.
we'll make up patterns just to make things fit. So we'll say, oh,
Mhm.
the pyramid must have been built, I don't know, by aliens because it's in the exact center landmass of, Earth or whatever. But we won't say that same thing about any other pyramid or any other building on the planet because it just doesn't fit. We're really good about making things seem more important or better than they are because we can just say 25 million qubits all of a sudden matters. It's a pattern. And we do this all the time in our everyday lives too. So that's the thing we have to be really careful about is did the people really intend it to be that way in the past? Or did it just happen, is it a crazy random happenstance?
Was it just luck? At the end of
Pretty
the
much.
day, was it really just luck?
It could
Yeah.
be.
I don't want to detract from like the intelligence and sophistication of people in the past, but I think some of the things we like ascribe them credit for just so happen to be lucky.
Yeah. The next thing is that if you take the length of the Great Pyramid at its mean socket level, it measures to 365.242 cubit long, which is the same to the amount of days in a year.
I mean, they also made the cubit measurement. So like
True.
also, okay, that one is like just a huge coincidence. Like
That's a big flex.
sure. But like I'm sure you could take how long my arms are and divide that by 365 and be like, okay, that's how long a cubit is. I am as long as there are many days of the year. Like what?
To imagine, and I'm not a mathematician, I cannot do math for like anything, but I do imagine that because like there's just like rules of geometry that are coming into play here. Like the Earth is round and it goes around in a circle, and the pyramid is based off of like shapes, and that for some reason like that's how this all looks. You know what I mean? Where like it has to just deal with like the rules of geometry, and that's going to happen for anything that you build.
Well, I mean, also, if maybe they did try to make it like 365, maybe they tried to make it like a year. I feel like again, going back to you can't, discredit the intellectual ability of the people that lived in the past. Why didn't they build the pyramid based off of the year? Because they're staring at the stars. They know that there's a cycle. So why don't they mimic like if they're going to build a pyramid, it's for someone of royalty. Why not give that, that why not build the pyramid based off a year? You know, like they could have done it on purpose.
Yeah, if I was an Egyptian pharaoh and this was supposed to be like my place where I was gonna like be rested after I die, and this is where I was gonna spend the rest of eternity, I would want people to put this kind of effort into it too.
Yeah,
fair.
exactly.
Like,
Did they measure
Yeah.
the year the same way though? Like did they have the same calendar of the 365 days?
I don't know.
I actually
I
do not know.
don't know. It didn't mention it. This is from the video, Nathan, that you shared with us in class. So it didn't mention that, but you could think
I mean,
maybe.
that doesn't really have to do with this necessarily. That's just in general for anyone out there who knows what calendars the Egyptian used. Let us know.
Yeah,
Right.
and I'm assuming no. I'm not an Egyptologist,
Yeah.
but I'm going to assume no, just because like the Mayans had their own calendar. Even the difference between the Gregorian and the Julian calendar, which isn't even that big of a difference. Has
Yeah.
difference. I'm gonna say probably not, but I don't know.
Yeah, and so the last one on this list is very impressive. This is the most impressive one, I think, that the measurements of the length and width of the Great Pyramid corresponds to an exact fraction of both the latitude and longitude measurements of the equator. This means that the Great Pyramid directly corresponds to the circumference of the equator, as well as the measurements from the equator to the pole, making it a scale model of the northern hemisphere.
Okay. We need to translate that because I don't so the length and width of it is a fraction of the latitude and longitude of the equator. Oh, okay. Actually, that makes more sense now that I say that again. It's just that it's
Okay.
a fraction of it. That it's just this, but it has the same ratio, I would assume. Like the
Okay.
length to width of the Great Pyramids is ratio to the latitude and longitude. Okay.
I did not know there would be this much math involved.
There's a lot of
That's
math.
Because I'm
There's a
trying to
lot of
figure out how
math.
you take like a square base of a pyramid and make it an exact model of something round like the Earth.
Yeah.
But also, if you look at the video and you just see all the lines, because they took the points of the pyramid and they kind of wrapped it around the Earth and just showed you this big Venn diagram kind of what it looked like. It's very impressive, and it's just, again, I don't know what I said.
I'm sure
But
this also was not done on purpose. Like this also sounds like something that was like a
But
coincidence.
this is why people think that maybe there were like
It was
ancient aliens, because all of this is just so precise. It's like, what the
Yeah.
heck?
fair.
Well, I mean, if I'm making up these theories, if I'm trying to prove a point, I'm gonna put in like big words like if you take the fraction of the circumference of the Earth and mix it up, like people are gonna be so confused. They're just gonna be like, "All right, okay."
Yeah.
I mean, as you
True.
know, Parkies don't do math, but this was a lot to try and like understand. Because I had to watch this video like a numerous amount of times, and I still don't understand it necessarily. But that's what I have on my list. And I know, Nathan, you wanted to talk about Stonehenge because people kind of think that aliens had created Stonehenge. So why don't I hand it off to you?
Yeah. So people tend to think that aliens built Stonehenge for the same exact reasons that they think that aliens built the pyramids. Because just like we were talking, and there's all of these weird coincidences with the measurements of the pyramids, there's also a lot of coincidences with Stonehenge as well, where it's perfectly aligned with certain star structures and certain planets and things like that as well. And so all of a sudden now you've got people saying like, well, aliens came down, they built Stonehenge, and now Stonehenge is round, and now the Stonehenge is actually a place where UFOs can land and take off. That's what a lot of pseudoarchaeologists will say that the function of Stonehenge is. It's a place where aliens could see from space that they could then land their spacecraft.
Like an
And
airport.
it's all, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it all has to do with the way that it's aligned with the stars. But as we mentioned earlier, people could see space, they could see stars, they could see these other planets just like we do when the news tells you go outside because you can see Mars tonight. They could say the same thing. So it's this idea that every time something crazy happens in the past that it has to be aliens is the problem, rather
Yeah.
than just admitting that people were smart, or again that we impose patterns on whatever we find.
hmm
Yeah, I think we probably imposed patterns. I think that's a solid one of what I've just been saying, which is that it's all a coincidence. But it's also just that, like, if you look for something hard enough, you will find it.
Class, didn't we, Nathan, talk about that like Stonehenge was almost used for like a grave kind of like royalty? And
It wouldn't have been royalty,
yeah, I
but
think
it
that's what,
probably had something to do with death rituals in general. So not
or the
to,
rituals, yeah.
yeah, so not to get too, but Stonehenge, near Stonehenge, if you go down to this river and you follow the river down a little bit, there's another henge, another circle, and it's actually made of wood, and it's creatively named Woodhenge. So you have Woodhenge and Stonehenge. And there's this idea that Woodhenge was about celebrations of life because wood is alive and then it decays, and that Stonehenge is nearby and that it is a celebration of death because stone is dead, but it's also eternal, and that the river connects both of them. And this is an
Oh.
idea by archaeologist Mark Parker Pearson, and it's based off of some religious beliefs from Madagascar that people have there, and it's very similar in the way they use wood and stone and things like that.
Have you heard of, I don't know if you know this, Nathan, but in our previous podcast episode, we talked about, I think it was Gavin, talked about Carhenge.
Oh, I
Do you
did.
remember
Oh.
That's a place in America where someone used a bunch of old. I was actually just thinking about that in our Bizarre Tourist Attractions episode 4. That it's someone like it doesn't have to do with the aliens. That's just someone took a bunch of old cars and assembled them to look like Stonehenge, but they're like made out of cars and they spray painted them like gray. It seems very cool. I forget where it is.
Oh,
but
that's gonna freak out some archaeologist in like a couple hundred years. They're gonna look at that and go,
True.
"What?" the hell?"
They're like, how did all of these cars get perfectly positioned to be like what? Yeah. Unless they listen
Not
to our
to-
podcast episode, then they'll know it's fake.
right? Not to sound too much like an archaeology nerd, but when I was an undergraduate, my friends and I actually had a competition where you had to make Stonehenge out of food, and whoever had the best Stonehenge out of anything edible won. And I did not win because I don't have any artistic bone in my body, so I'm not good at art and I'm not good at math. But you know, this is something else that we did. But yeah, so Stonehenge is really famous. But again, it's just people were smart, and I know that it's confusing because how did they build it? We still don't really know to this day how they moved the stones. They probably rolled them or used kind of sled. But you know, you're dedicated enough, you have enough people, you can pretty much do anything you want.
I think
That remi-
another thing that probably weirds people out about Stonehenge is that it's like kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's not like it's like on the edge of a town. Like I don't know if you guys have been there, but
No.
just to flex that I studied abroad. It's like you gotta like drive to some place, then you gotta take like a bus. Like it's like in the middle of like hills. It's in the middle of like nowhere pretty much. I mean, it's tourist attraction, so it's easy to, like there's ways to get to it, but it's really just kind of a bunch of huge rocks that you just see in the distance, and there's just a long pathway to keep people off the grass.
I mean, when I think of like Stonehenge, I was a big Doctor Who fan. And there was, do you know it, Nathan? You like kind of nodded your head. I was like, okay. Well, there was an episode. It was like one of the season, kind of like when the season was ending, where they went to Stonehenge and it involved like Pandora's box. It was weird because it also had to do with fluctuation of time, and I was like, oh my gosh. But that's kind of when that's what I think about of Stonehenge as well. Like, just fun fact.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
It
Gavin,
remi-
to get back to your point really fast, the Stonehenge was built in the Neolithic, which is the period of human prehistory where people first started settling down into villages and farming. So when Stonehenge was built, literally everything was in the middle of nowhere.
True.
Like there were no cities.
Yeah.
So, you know, the location in that case doesn't matter.
Yeah, and there could have been a civilization near there that is just not there now. And then we rediscovered it again, and then it was then preserved.
Yeah, there was no what we would call civilization at this time in Northwest Europe near the United Kingdom or anything like that. They were just a bunch of small little villages just kind of living their lives. You know, I think personally, I think I mentioned in class that they were just boring farmers. You know,
Yeah.
you have you
Yeah.
have the pyramids being built, you have the Sumerians doing their thing, you have China and the Indus Valley doing their thing, but Europeans for the most part were just happy living their little farmer lives. Like
Yeah, they were just vibing. They were just
Just vibing, man.
doing what they do. Yeah.
Ivan and Bill Stonehenge, you know?
Right. They would do it. They would do a lot of weird stuff. Like they would. You were saying that they would like. I don't know if this was the Neolithic, but they would like bury their family members like in their basement.
Yeah, that was like it was cool,
the
but like
Neo-
I wouldn't do that.
The Neolithic is great for its death rituals. You know, no matter what part of Europe or the Near East that you're in, this is the time where they would like they would take bodies out and like mix them up and put them back into
Ugh.
like chamber tombs. You would bury parts of people, you would cool stuff, burying people under the floorboards. I had to read an article about that in one of my graduate classes. My current roommate was in that class, I know, and he'll be like, "Who's under the floor?"
Who was under the floor?
Nathan, I want to thank you so much for coming on this episode and being a guest.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this seems like a very broad topic that, I mean, great job doing research, Leah. I know you were very stressed about this episode, and this was like the most
Yeah.
research you've ever done for a podcast episode, but
Right.
it's very vast. And I'm sure that
Mhm.
there's so many other examples that didn't even have time to touch upon. And there were
Mhm.
even ones that you told us. But yeah, well, if there's enough other things, then maybe you'll have to do a part 2, Leah.
We might have to do a part 2.
We didn't cover
Yeah,
fairies
I
or
was thinking
hobbits.
about that.
Wait, we didn't cover. I'm sorry. What was that, Nathan? We didn't what?
We didn't cover fairies or hobbits or
Oh
anything.
wow.
Yeah, the existence of
True.
Bigfoot.
Well, maybe Chris
Oh,
could do.
we
since
have
Chris
we
was
have
in the
done an episode
class,
on Bigfoot. Yes, and maybe Chris will do
Oh,
the
we did
part
do an
2
episode
because
of Bigfoot.
and we'll have like
Oh!
Nathan on for that one.
There was something I forget. I'm blanking on the whole thing, but they said that they found like Bigfoot something up in like Washington, and they were like, oh, this is like a tribe. They were like it's in like an ancient tribe of like early humans that they found, and it was like in a place that they wouldn't have found. They didn't find any humans there before, and it was just, I forget what it was, but it reminded me of class just because it was like they were talking about like humans crossing over from the land bridge down to Oregon and that area, and they found like gigantic humans and like, oh, this is this is Bigfoot, and it was just pseudoarchaeology basically. Like there was no other, it was just one set. They never found any other bones from anyone else, and it was just like they don't even know if they were real that they found them. It was something that reminds me of that. Yeah.
The other thing is that actually, surprisingly, bear bones, like of just like big, huge grizzly bears or cave bears, actually surprisingly look like a lot like human bones if you only find one of them.
Mm-hmm.
If you find like a bear limb, you can easily confuse it with a human limb, especially like bear fingers and toes, but they're very close to human fingers and toes. So one thing that they use to train archaeologists on how to identify human remains is they'll actually throw a human bone into a brown paper bag, and you have to reach into the bag and feel around and identify the bone and what side of the body it comes from. And one common thing that they'll do is they'll throw in bear bones, because a lot of times you'll be like, oh yeah, this is a human femur and it's from the left side, and it's like from a bear the whole time.
That sounds like A&P, like anatomy and physiology, because like there's a class where you have to distinguish one little bone and like it sounds like A&P.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that like Bigfoot and all those types of things are like a type of pseudoarchaeology, because then we did an episode on pseudoarchaeology. You should check it out, listener. It's episode 24, Bigfoot, Devils, and Other Cryptids. Chris talked about it. Check it out. And Chris will probably do wow. Pseudoarchaeology is, I feel like, probably a lot of what we've talked about, actually. We've had there's a lot, and we just didn't know about it. Wow. I feel like my eyes are being opened right now. So we'll definitely, this is a whole new category of stuff. We'll definitely have to talk more about all this stuff. This is the type of stuff that I'm interested in. All these urban legend type of things. Yeah.
It's a lot to research. So Chris, if you're gonna do pseudoarchaeology, you're up next.
Yeah.
I'm tapped out. This was a lot.
Just watch the History Channel for a few hours. It's all there.
Fair.
Yeah.
Exactly it. Well, thank you so much for listening. This has been This Strange World. I'm Gavin.
I'm Leah.
I'm Chris. Thanks for listening.
Stay strange. Bye.
Bye.
This podcast was produced by Gavin Berger, Leah Ettinger, and Chris Ash. Our theme song is by DJ Kai Song, and our logo is designed by Michael Zilvetti.
Be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and check out more episodes of This Strange World available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at This Strange World Podcast, and on Twitter at This Strange Pod. If you have any other ideas for future episodes, let us know. You can DM us on our social medias or email hello@thisstrangeworldpodcast.com.
And now it's time for the sources, because we're not pseudoarchaeologists, although I'm sure it's a very fun field to be in, about making up fake archaeology. So Leah, where did you find your sources today?
Thanks so much, Gavin. Okay, so the first source came from ahotcupofjoe.net called What is Pseudoarchaeology? The next one is from Wikipedia, Kensington Runestone. Again, Wikipedia, Pseudoarchaeology. Wikipedia, again, Atlantis, #modern. Rational Wikipedia, Ark of the Covenant. Wikipedia, Ark of the Covenant. Wikipedia, 2012 Phenomenon. And YouTube, Ancient Aliens, Great Pyramids, Shocking Precision, Season 12 History from the History Channel. And those are all my sources for today's episode.
Fantastic. I think Wikipedia is fine for good overview stuff. Plus, they have their own sources. So you're really just pulling together the summary. But that was a lot of research and a great episode. Very interesting. So many interesting things to talk about.
Oh, 100%.
Final thoughts.
I think this was really, like you said, interesting episode. It was very broad. There's a lot of pseudo-archaeology literally about everything in history from past to present, and check it out if you want. The thing about if you're finding it, the fun thing about looking about pseudo-archaeology is finding the like fake claims and then seeing like the actual ones, the real ones from
the fact
versus the fiction, exactly. So it's kind of like a fun little scavenger hunt, more of a stressful scavenger hunt for me, but
Were you stressed out?
Oh my god,
I don't know, you only mentioned it every day the past few days.
I mean, it's not like I messed up numerous times, but like you edited them out.
That'll all be edited out. But yeah, this was a great episode, and I'm totally looking forward to this whole new brand of interesting worldly stuff, pseudo-archaeology. I'm very looking forward to new episodes related to that.
Of course. Well, Chris, I pass the torch to you.
Thank you. I'll take it with pride. I love this stuff. I'll take it with pride.
Very cool. Well, now it's the epilogue, so be sure to episode 3. We've each done an episode this season. I would say 3 pretty kick butt episodes.
Oh yeah.
With an awesome guest.
Yes, Nathan was great. So glad that he could join us.
Yeah.
But 3 great ones, and be sure to come back next week for another great episode that Chris will lead. And it's another good one.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Very exciting. So, bye.
Bye.
Bye. Chris is scared. Bye.
What am I leading?
The next episode next
says...
week. You're doing next week's episode. Bye. Get ready,
Bye.
Chris. Bye.
I'm ready. Bye.
Get ready. Bye.